Great. So thanks for both joining, dialing in on the call today. I'm just opening up the document to take notes in. So the reason that I was hoping to chat with both of you today is that there is this issue now about adding the feature category information to the dashboards to finish up this project about having the feature category information on all of the controllers and the endpoints. And as I was just saying to Bob, because we just had our one-on-one, I want to understand where we are now in terms of what is going to be visible on the dashboard, and talk a little bit about what is going to happen in the middle between that being the starting point and the end point being stage groups are using it, they can see interesting things happening and they know what to do about what they see. Because I feel like there's a certain amount of stuff that we're going to have to build or write or prepare for stage groups to be able to give them this. I feel like if we just dump it on in their Slack channel, they're probably not going to use it if there's not a lot of instruction for what they can use it for. So that was what I was hoping to talk about today. And perhaps we could start by talking about what's there at the moment, what that ticket entails for putting it on the dashboard, and what we're expecting to see when that ticket is finished.
Yeah, Bob, do you want to start?
Well, maybe you could start by explaining what is going to be on the dashboard that we have now. I already told Rachel that that's more of a dashboard for us to see, like the information is there, like we have stuff coming in.
Yeah, exactly. So at the moment, what we're doing is we're putting the error rates per feature category onto the error budgets dashboard. And in the MR that I've got open at the moment, we don't have wait a minute, let me just open my MR to remember what we don't have.
We don't have a division into which request is actually, like which endpoint is actually causing errors and which one.
Yes, and the other thing we don't have is the aggregation across all services, right? So we have error rates per Sidekick per feature category, for web per feature category, per Git per feature category, and per API per feature category. What we don't have is an aggregation of those. Now, for us, the aggregation is going to be useful. For teams, I actually think the aggregation across service maybe we don't need right now. Like that, you know, like for them, like I feel like what a team wants is like, here's a dashboard with all my feature categories, here's the information per service for those. Whereas what we want is across all services, which feature categories are the most problematic. Like, you know, those are sort of the different ways we're looking at it, right?
Also, because we would also need the aggregation for the actual budgets. Right now we don't have budgets, but we need to.
Yes, that's true.
We will need the aggregation to have a budget that is declining.
Yeah, exactly. And part of the reason we don't have that now is because, you know, I've still got this first MR open. Part of the reason is we need to determine the weighting for each service. And also part of the reason is that, and this is sort of a bigger miss, this is quite a big miss at the moment, but I don't think it should block us from moving forward, is that we don't have app decks per feature category. We just have error rate per feature category for the HTTP traffic, so for web, Git, and API. So for Sidekick, we have both app decks and error rate per feature category, and per queue. The cardinality of doing that by controller action makes it impossible to do that for the Rails side anyway, but we also don't have app decks. So what we probably need to do there is add a new metric with like 2 buckets and probably not the status code, right, Bob? And just like 2 buckets, feature category, and then we use that for the
status code being good, not good.
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, we probably want status, like maybe first digit of status code is what we want.
I think the first, no, good, not good would be enough.
Yeah, okay. And yeah, so like, this is where we're sort of hitting problems with the Prometheus cardinality, basically, because like if we have controller times action times feature category, well, actually times feature category shouldn't really add much, because like every feature category is, every controller action pair is just one feature category, but then times status code times every host we have and it's times all the buckets we have for the timings, like that quickly multiplies very, very fast. I'm going to stop talking for a second. So that's kind of where we are.
And yeah, so what is next? I think
so once we've added the, so once Sean's MR is in, that essentially closes this project's worth of work. Everything's categorized, it's on that dashboard, that's done. So it sounds like forward from this is the next project and determining what the outcome of the project is going to be, like how far the next step takes us, and all the pieces of work that we're going to have to do to get to that next step. So I suppose that becomes a question: is what is the end point of the next step? How big a step do we take next?
Yeah, so I'm just going to share a link in Zoom chat, I guess, which is an issue I got mentioned on, but I didn't realize that you weren't already on it, Rachel. Marin is already on it. So it's about training people how to use the metrics that we already have to watch when changing feature flags. And one thing I mentioned in there is that we would like to be able to create these team-specific dashboards. So like, there are a couple of ways we could do it, right? Like we could create a dashboard that has a drop-down for team, or we could create team-specific dashboards like that we auto-generate based on those teams. I think initially we'd probably just do the former, but one advantage of the second one is that it would be very easy because like we can use common code. That's like, you know, JSON it, like that's the selling point. That would make it easier for teams to add their own spin on their dashboards as well, to like customize them. Whereas obviously if it's one shared dashboard that you have a drop down for,
yeah, I think
teams can't really customize that in their own space.
Each team having their own dashboard that's at least built from a common base makes a lot of sense. And also having it so that they're common, like there's certain types of things that are common across the top of the dashboard for every team, and below a certain line, this is where everything's being customized, so that anyone from either infrastructure or development can look at the top stuff and see something common that they understand. And then everything below that is whatever the team feels that they need to see. And perhaps we even work with the team on that to show them what the options are for the extra stuff that they can view that is specific to them.
Yeah, I'm just going to throw out a few options here as well, because I was just thinking about some other things we can do here. So like team-specific dashboards. When we aggregate, if we know which feature categories belong to a team, which we need to know to make the team-specific dashboards, that means that we also could do some funky stuff with like label replace in Prometheus to do dashboards by team. So like,
which would also reduce cardinality.
Yes, depending on at which point we do the label replace, right? Like if we do the label replace, like we still have the cardinality in the underlying metric. If we use the label replacement in the recording rule, I'm just a bit worried that it would be like a giant expression, and like intuitively I feel like an expression that's like this long is going to take longer to evaluate, but that might not actually be true. But yeah, we can look at that. So that's the thing we can look at. And I also wonder about Cabana, because I use Cabana more than I use Prometheus.
And I saw some folks in the package team, for example, building their own dashboards already in Cabana, because, well, it's a bit easier to work with and to look at the stuff.
Yeah, I tend to use metrics for things that aren't in Cabana, like, which means like historical data. Like obviously our metrics retention is much longer than our logs retention, at least in Elasticsearch. Also things that like, you know, like, what's a good example? How many pods do we have running, for instance? Like that's very easy to get out of Prometheus. Like you probably could figure it out from Cabana, but it's kind of a hassle. So like those sort of like infrastructure level things. But in terms of application level stuff, I don't know. I wonder if the goal for the project should be to support this issue, almost to support the issue of like teams can roll out a feature flag and track the metrics in Cabana and in Grafana, like depending on like what's more appropriate, easily.
Sure, I'm just taking notes.
Because there's a bunch of things we could do.
I like the idea of supporting that issue, but focusing it a little more. I think that, I mean, I haven't read the whole issue, but just from the title, like this is specifically about when changing the feature flags, they want to know what they should be looking at. And I don't think that the feature flag part is actually that important. This is just a trigger mechanism for when they're going to be looking at the dashboards. But in general, they could look at the dashboards at any time, whether they've been flipping flags or not. But I like the idea of building a project around supporting this, because it's a follow-on from what we've been doing, and it feels like it's nearly there for eventually talking about error budgets.
Yeah, and I also think that, or I worry that if the goal is to build dashboards for the teams, that we're still missing the part of like when and why do they use the dashboards. Whereas if the goal is to use them in the process of feature flag rollouts, then that's sort of like your thin end of the wedge, like your introduction to like, you know, regularly checking, you know, what's going on these dashboards. Because
we already know that there's been more effort around, well, there's more effort being put into the way that feature flags are changed. And I'm not really keen on putting in too much process around watch the graphs, flip the flag, watch the graphs again, because I don't, you know, making processes really big is challenging. But at least if we can show people when you flip the flags, this is how you would look at it. This is what you would see. This is where you get the documentation. This is the board you look at, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I think, sorry, go on, Bob.
Not all feature flags are created equal. Like there's sometimes depending on what the feature flag is gating, different things would need to be watched. Like, is this going to put more pressure on Redis? Is this going to put pressure on the registry? Is this going to put pressure on Sidekick? That depends on the feature flag. So it's hard to tell in that sense what the team should be watching.
Would it be different from what the team should ordinarily be watching?
Well, I think that's what we're trying to solve with the feature categories. If we can give them, here's all your queues, here's all your requests, here's all your, whatever, then they can deduct from the flag that they flip what they need to watch. Like if they're opening up a new API endpoint, it should be already, it should already have a category, and then they could go from there to look at what is being rolled out, I think.
Yes, I'm just thinking about this, Bob, because I'm thinking like, so I mentioned earlier we'd have two sets of metrics like for the app decks, but like then you can't drill down on the same dashboard using the same metric. You would have to have the drill down be like to go to the controller dashboard for that service with already the controllers and actions pre-selected somehow, or like the feature category also as a drop down on the controller dashboard. Feature category as a feature category as a drop down on the controller dashboard probably makes sense. I could go and just do that now, but because we would have to use different metrics for like, you know, fundamental, like, you know, we're going to run into problems if we don't use different metrics. That also means that the dashboard's experience will be slightly more clunky. But I think the fundamental idea is right. Like what we want to do is we want to end up with, this is where you look at, this is where you drill down. And then you might want to drill down because something looks odd, or you might want to drill down because you want to look at something specific because you are rolling out a feature flag in a specific area. So like, for instance, if the code review team is rolling out something specific to, what's a good example? Image comments, that's probably not going to show up on their overall dashboard because their overall dashboard has got like a huge amount of stuff on it because the code review team like is responsible for a huge like part of GitLab. So they would really want to drill down for that. Whereas if the package team is rolling out like, hey, we now support like this major new feature, then that probably will show up on their overall dashboard because it's like a big thing.
I'm wondering if the stage groups themselves would want to drill down by feature category and not by endpoint, by queue, because they know what queues are theirs. They just want to, and that's where the feature categories come in. They want to have like a focus on the ones that apply to them, that are important to them. Within all
that's a fair point. Feature categories are really just an abstraction we use to help map things to teams. Like teams don't actually need to care about them day to day. They, we made them need to slightly care about them when they add a controller and they need to say what feature category it is, but they don't really think, like if you're on a team, you don't think, oh, well, this is like, this is related to, what's a good example? I can't think of a good example. This is related to one feature category in my area, and this is related to another one. Like they're both my area.
I think that some stage groups do. I think some stage groups it's a big it's a big group altogether. But I know that with the issues they do have the category scope label that show up on things, and I think that some of the product managers might be interested from the category perspective. From the feature category perspective. So I think we should definitely have a way of grouping them all together so that an engineering manager or product manager could look at everything that they are responsible for and then be able to drill down by feature category. But I think having, I think if we obscure that, we might be taking data away from them. But I also think that it's difficult to try and predict what they're going to want. I have a feeling that we're going to have to spend time with some engineering managers, product managers, engineers, taking them through a first iteration of things and then saying, well, what else would you like to see here? It feels like this is a UI project.
Yeah, I think what I'm getting from this is like, we want to have, as part of this project, like we basically want to spend all our time getting feedback from stage groups. So maybe the way we do this is we basically insert ourselves into feature flag rollouts for a period of time, like help find the charts that people need to look at, help build the charts if they don't exist or make them easier to find, and just like say we're going to spend like a month, 2 months just like deeply involved in feature flag rollouts and trying to help teams understand those as much as possible.
I really like that idea.
I've actually been doing that for a bit already as a maintainer. Like,
perfect.
But yeah, because it's like I see some people are struggling with finding where they need to look. So when they create the feature flag issue, I just comment like, here's a graph and here's a link to Thanos, link to the logs. Look at this when you roll this out, and then yeah, which I found easier because then I don't need to do it.
No, that makes a lot of sense, and I have seen you've been doing that on the issues. Now I understand a bit more why you've been doing it.
And going back to Cabana versus like Prometheus as well, I think that's part of the issue, right? Like, is like, for me, doing something ad hoc, I know Cabana will have the granularity I need, and I will just go in and build something. Like basically everything I share in Cabana is just like one of the share links, like for a ad hoc visualization I've created. But like, that's not discoverable unless you already know how to use Cabana. And like, obviously we want to teach people how to use that. But I think the really big advantage of the dashboards is discoverability. Like, it's already showing you what you want to use, and you can add dashboards in Cabana, but I don't think they're anywhere near as discoverable. And also, we just have a million like saved reports and dashboards and stuff, and it's like, it doesn't have the same structure as Grafana, where like you can like make it all nice, basically. So yeah,
I think that as you've said, they're inserting ourselves into the rollout of feature flags in a less ad hoc way will definitely help people understand how to use the dashboards more, because I imagine that if we build the dashboards and then go to the stage groups and say, hey, we've built these, please use them, I don't think that the uptake is going to be as great as if we're actually helping them through specific times when they need to use it, and this is what you look for. And then we almost keep a reference of the stage groups that we've helped, how many flags we've helped them with, And perhaps after we've helped with them with 3, we change how we're helping them. And we might find that there's some groups that just aren't using feature flags at all, and we need to think of a different way to engage with those groups.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I feel like that's probably the way to go, because we've got so many ways we could go with this, and it can be quite difficult to teach people. I think there are 2 things that make it difficult for us to teach people how to use this, just in terms of a training sense. I think one is motivation. Like, you know, I think the worst thing in the world basically is a training course for something that you then don't use again for 6 months, because then, like, you know, you're like, what is even the point of this? Like, why am I doing this? Like, when am I going to use this? And even if you, like, I remember doing, like, when I joined the Scalability team, I watched like a Prometheus talk, like, that was sort of explaining Prometheus. But it's only now that I've used Prometheus a lot that I actually understand what that talk was like. I felt like I understood it, but I didn't really understand, like, at a deep level, like, what was going on.
And I watched that talk as well when I first joined the team, but because I don't use it on a regular basis, like, I need to watch that talk repeatedly every time I have to do anything, just because I don't use it that much.
Yeah, and I think the temptation for a lot of people, certainly me, is to, like, when you understand something, is to try and explain it in the most fundamental terms. Like, so I was actually talking to a candidate about this. Like, you know, you could explain it in terms of the data types that are available in Prometheus, the metrics that are available. You've got counters, gauges, histograms, etc. But when you're using it, when you're typing in a query, it doesn't tell you whether it's a counter, a gauge, or a histogram. Like, that's not what you're looking at. Like, what you're looking at is, like, which metric do I want? How do I know which metric I want? So that's one reason. Well, that's both reasons, actually. The motivation and the explaining it is harder if you're trying to do that up front rather than trying to do it to solve a particular task. So I think having it task focused is also a good way we could get some Prometheus, Grafana, Cabana training in a relevant way to the teams that will actually hopefully stick, because they will continue to use it in future.
Okay. Regarding, like, this is a bit of a tangent, but how often do you use Grafana, Sean? Like, I find myself not using it very often.
I use it quite a bit to get a query that I then shove into Thanos.
Like to see what we're looking at there, and then adjust it to what you need. Yeah.
Yeah, I also use it sometimes I find the Grafana Explore interface better for, like, doing an absolute date range than Thanos, but I just recently figured out how to do the absolute date range in Thanos, which is, like, you set the moment to the end of the date range, and then you set the period backwards from that. I did not know that before. I found that out, like, last week, and it's blown my mind. So yeah, I mostly use Thanos. Is basically the answer there.
Rachel also brought up something interesting that might be relevant, because you mentioned, like, let's work with the feature groups to roll out flags and build dashboards and help them get the information they need. And Rachel mentioned like, maybe pairing up with 1 or 2 groups in the beginning to start with something. What do you think about that, Sean? Because I don't know how many groups we have, if we would work with all of them. Like, we're only 4 people.
I think it sort of overlaps with what Sean's been saying about focusing it on tasks and feature flag rollouts. So what we could do is I could ask, well, one, I know that having spoken with people in registry, it sounds like they'd be keen to work with us on this. But the other thing that I could do is just ask amongst the EMs if there's any other stage groups that would be willing to be the first round of people who work with us on this. And we just pick maybe 2 or 3 and we start there, work with them, iterate, roll it out to a bigger group, and see how that goes. But I like the idea of tracking what we're doing across the stage groups to make sure that we touch everyone.
How do we make sure?
Yeah. Sorry, go on, Mob.
Because I like the idea of focusing on a single group to see what they actually want and what we can help them build. But how do we make sure that we do it generic enough that we don't need to do it again every time?
Well, I think that's why, at least if we have maybe two or 3 engineering manager participants, they can also talk about, I'm not interested in this, I'm more interested in that. And just across a small group, you see what's common and not common, and at least it gives you the starting ground of the commonality stuff, rather than building something specifically for registry and then realizing at a later stage that really less than half of this is relevant for other people.
I'm just going to say, I think our default failure mode, certainly mine, is to go too generic. So I think it's unlikely we will end up too specific, just because, like, you know, my temptation is to, you know, definitely to go too generic. And also, the way we're talking about this, it sounds like a cross between a scalability project and also a GitLab working group. I don't know if we want a working group for this, but like when we're talking about participants, like maybe if we wanted to limit the participants, that's the way we would do it.
I would love to do this without a working group, because I feel like working groups just add this like overhead of hire a working group, and I know that I'll have to run it. So I would prefer to engage with specific people about it. Do it if we structure our project properly. We have a proper reference either in the GitLab or GitLab tracker or our tracker, but we bring them into the way, like this way of working. I'm pretty sure that we'll get through it well and come out with a good result. I think from here it's about setting up this project, being specific about what we want to achieve, and then reaching out to find those 3 people that would be interested in working with us to start. And perhaps that is finding the ones that are the most common users of feature flags, so they're the most likely people to join in. Or is this just a case of I should just ask for participants and pick 3?
Okay, that sounds good to me. I think, yeah, I definitely prefer the less overhead. And it sounds like we have a plan.
Good. So what I will do is I'll try and write up what we've done here into an epic, and I will put that epic into our structure and I'll copy the whole team on, just so that everyone knows what we're thinking about here. And then we have to figure out when we're going to be picking this up to work on.
Yeah, I think it would be good to sync up with Marion on that, which obviously you probably would anyway. Sorry, Slightbot would have pinged me for saying obviously there, which you probably would have anyway.
Obviously.
So, yeah. Because like he's assigned to that issue that I linked to. So like he might have a particular opinion on like A, whether this is a good idea, but B, like if this is something we want to do soon. Like the issue's due date is November the 2nd, for instance.
Okay.
But like, you know, if this is something like we want to get in place now, or if it's something we'd want to leave until after the holidays because we've got a couple of projects in place that basically take us up till Christmas anyway, or like do we want to rearrange things? Like I think
Sure.
Yeah.
No, I think in terms of what we're doing in the team at the moment, we need to get the rate limiting stuff out of the way and done. I'd left some space open for a project about Gitaly, but it seems that there's one specific bug that has caused this problem. So I'm busy discussing with Alberto how it gets resolved, if we're going to go back to the stage group to sort this out.
I think Heinrich came up with an idea to fix that. So because like yesterday I was just kind of sad because like I found the security MR and like because I was reviewing another security MR and I was like, I don't think this will work very well because like we're either solving a security issue but like breaking a big performance and scaling improvement, or the opposite. Like we're basically saying we can only have one or the other, and what we really want is both. And then 7 months ago we created an issue about that, and then it just kind of stalled. But because it's Heinrich, I think he thinks he's figured out a solution. So hopefully that will go away, and that might actually, like you said, get rid of a lot of the Gitaly incidents that we've had lately.
Yeah, and that means I think there was like 11 incidents over the past 3 months would go away, which means that Gitaly falls back down into the normal range for how many incidents are being created on it, which is obviously less stressful. And the service web project that we created about looking into incidents, those incidents are so old now that I don't think it's relevant anymore for us to go digging in there. So I would put forward that this, I think we have space to look at something like this, but I think let's get it created and get it into the process, and then we'll see where it lands up fitting in.
Okay, sounds good.
Awesome. I'm very happy. This is good. Well, thank you so much for yeah.
Sorry, just to wrap up. Basically, when I'm done adding the error budget information to the dashboards, that project is pretty much done, right, Bob? Like that's the scope of that project done. Like you have the information. Yeah.
The dashboard is just there to prove to us that we've added the information to all endpoints, and like I haven't set the threshold to like how much of it can be not owned, but
yeah, obviously with the GraphQL thing. I feel like with the blog post that I wrote, this is another example of where we could have like restructured the project a bit, like to have some impact on the stage groups, like at each, like, because I feel like we've kind of done the same thing again, but in a much smaller scale, where like, you know, we've added this to a dashboard that only we use. We've added this to Cabana, but we're the heaviest users of Cabana. Like we've added this to Prometheus, but we're the heaviest users of Prometheus, you know.
Well, it's also a hard one because you want to bring people along from the point at which it makes sense to them to be brought along.
Right, exactly. Like before we started this project, like it would have been useless to them.
Yeah, and if you've only labeled like 5% of the controllers, again, like how much value does the stage group get out of it? How much value do we get out of it? I take your point, like rearranging it, we may have been able to get somewhere slightly different, but I don't think that this is all bad. I think that all of the stage group focused stuff happens in the next project.
Oh no, I think that's fine. Like, it's just because I'm like keyed into noticing that pattern now. Like, you know.
Well, I'm glad that you're keyed into noticing it.
I think like a way of doing this would be starting the project that we just like the thing that we just discussed now would be part of the first project, and we just do a single feature category, like a single group, not a feature category, but a single stage group with their feature categories and building out.
So you mean instead of finding 3, we just find 1?
Yes, well, like find 1 and then add feature categories to all of their stuff, and then see what.
I quite like that idea actually, because the time to like getting some feedback from a stage group is lower if we're just doing it hyper focused, because we don't have to like we can just hard code it, right? Like we don't have to do the whole like how do we map feature categories to teams, like how do we keep that up to date. All we have to do is say, these are the feature categories for this team, here's your dashboard, let's go and work with you on this. Like, you know,
and then for the second one, you take what you've done the first time and make it generic for taking the second case into account.
Exactly, like you would say in code, like it's like don't repeat yourself, but if you're not repeating your, like what's the one in Ruby, you ain't gonna need it. Like if you haven't actually duplicated the code yet, don't assume you're going to duplicate it. Like, you know, just do what you need to do to get the thing out the door now. And because we're doing all this in JSON, it's relatively easy to do this. Like, but I think the hard part will be like mapping the feature categories to the teams. And like, if we can defer that and get some impact out for these a team or 2 teams initially, that would be huge, because like then we're not spending like a week, 2 weeks, like just talking to ourselves again, which is what I worry I would do.
I really like that. I really like that, because especially like you said, that we don't have to think about how to make it generic to start, you just build it. And then we think about it for the second time when we've already got so much thinking done. Like
and then we spend our iteration time up front on like making something that's good for a stage group, and then later on we make it generic rather than making it generic and then passing out to stage groups and trying to iterate. Like, you know, I think that's the better way around.
Okay. So I'll create the epic, and I'm going to go and find a stage group, and I'll put in the channel which one I'm thinking about, or if there's any one specifically that you think are going to be better than others, but we can have that conversation async.
I think we look at because I think now we can look at the feature categories YAML and see which groups have the most feature flags YAML, and see which group have the most feature flags open at the moment. That's one way we could do it. We could say, you're a heavy user of feature flags, we'd like to speak to you. And like you said, registry, like package, you know, you're clearly doing stuff in this space. Like, you know, would you be interested in like pairing more deeply with us? I think David in particular on the package team is like, Bob and I have like interacted with him a bunch lately on this stuff. He is like super duper engaged on this. So that would be a good start too. So yeah.
Okay, awesome. I think this has been a very productive call. Anything else before we end? Great. Thank you so much. This has been great. I'm going to, the notes are available in the Scalability meetings document, and I'll upload this onto, I was going to say unlimited, unlisted. Not unlisted.
Unfiltered.
Unfiltered, yeah. I got there eventually. Cool.
GitLab Unchained.
Yeah. Have a good day, and we'll chat soon.
Bye.